Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the surprisingly messy and kind of chaotic story of how a legal system gets built from the ground up in a brand new colonial town. So let's head back to 17th century India to a place called Madras and see just how it all got started.
So just imagine for a second, you're starting a new settlement on the complete other side of the world. You've got merchants, you've got soldiers, you've got locals, and they all have totally different customs. How on earth do you create a system of justice that actually works for everybody? Well, that was the exact problem staring the English East India Company right in the face.
Okay, so our story kicks off in 1639. The English have just set up this small trading post. But, and this is key, it's not one unified place. Nope. From its very foundation, Madras was a settlement that was divided, both physically and, as we'll see, legally.
On one side, you had what they called White Town. This was the fortified area where the English and other European residents lived. And then, right outside, you had Black Town, this sprawling settlement for the local Indian population. This physical separation was basically the blueprint for two very different and very unequal systems of justice.
So what did this actually look like? Well, in White Town, any kind of justice was handled by the so-called English court, which really was just the company's chief merchant, the agent, and his business counsel. Meanwhile, over in Blacktown, cases were heard at the Chowtry Court, which was run by a local official known as the Adigar. So you've got two towns, two courts, and a system that was about to face its first big test.
And yeah, it really didn't take long for a crisis to pop up and expose just how fragile this whole improvised legal setup really was. A serious crime was about to force these company merchants to confront a question they had absolutely no answer for. Who actually has the power to deliver the ultimate justice here? And here it is. Here's what happened. Just 3 years after the town was founded, a British soldier was killed inside the settlement. Now, the accused wasn't another company employee. He was a Portuguese man who also lived in White Town. And this was a massive problem.
So what was the company's reaction? The agent and his counsel, the guys who were supposed to be the judges of White Town, they completely panicked. They were unwilling, and maybe more importantly, they felt they were unauthorized to pass judgment on a citizen of another European country. So what was their solution? They punted. They referred the entire case to the local Indian ruler, basically admitting their own system was completely powerless.
Well, news of this legal mess eventually made its way all the way back to London. King Charles II and the Crown realized that for the East India Company to truly govern its territories, it needed real, official legal authority. The solution was going to come in the form of a royal charter.
And let me tell you, this charter was a total game changer. It officially gave the company's governor and council the power to judge everyone living under their flag, company employees, locals, everybody, in all matters, both civil and criminal. And this is a big and, they were to do it all according to one specific legal code, the laws of England.
This created a huge shift, right? The power structure went from a bunch of merchants making business decisions to a formal governor and council that could wield the full authority of English law. You'd think that would solve the problem perfectly, but in reality, it just created a brand new one.
You see, all this new power came with a really heavy burden, and for these merchants turned judges, it inspired a whole lot of fear. I mean, they were now armed with the authority to decide matters of life and death, and frankly, it terrified them.
I mean, you have to remember, these guys were businessmen. They weren't lawyers or trained judges. They had no idea about the finer points of English law. So when they were faced with these complex criminal cases and the very real possibility of getting a judgment totally wrong, they just hesitated. They became paralyzed by their own power.
And this paralysis led to a real human crisis, which is perfectly captured in the case of an Englishman who was accused of murdering another Englishman. Now, this should have been a pretty straightforward case for the newly empowered court. It was not. The accused man was thrown in jail, and there he sat for 31 months. That's nearly 3 years just locked away in a terrible condition. But why?
Because even with the new charter, the council was so scared of making a mistake that they fell right back into their old habit. They completely refused to hold a trial. Instead, they referred the case all the way back to England for advice. So justice wasn't just delayed here, it was completely abandoned.
Okay, this clearly could not continue. So in 1678, a new and very decisive governor named Strangeham, Master, arrives in Madras. He saw this broken system for exactly what it was and decided, right, that's it. It's time for a complete overhaul. It was time to build a real court.
So just to recap, before Governor Master showed up, this is what you had. The governor and council kinda pretending to be a court, and the Chалтry Court, which by then was being run by junior English servants. The whole thing was informal, inconsistent, and it was obviously not working.
Master's solution was a total reorganization from top to bottom. He transformed the governor's council into a formal High Court of Judicature, and he also reorganized the Chалтry Court, making it a proper, subordinate court with clear responsibilities.
Now, this wasn't just a name change. This new High Court met regularly, twice a week. It formally administered English law, and this is the most important part, it used a jury of 12 men. This was brilliant because it shared the burden of judgment and finally gave the officials the confidence they needed to actually make decisions. This created the first truly formal English court on Indian soil.
And so after 40 years of just absolute chaos, a stable judicial system was finally put in place. But it leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. Was this the admirable beginning of a modern, formal legal system for India? Or was it simply the moment that a trading company finally forged the tools it needed to impose its own laws and its own control on a foreign land?
It's a question really worth thinking about. But that's all for this explainer. If you found this story insightful, please do give it a like, share it with a friend.